guys, welcome back to another episode of the Whisky Diaries. We're here today at Old Pulteney Distillery live in our Scotland tour that we're currently doing. This was considered, up to 2 weeks ago, this was considered the northest distillery in mainland in Scotland. Now it's actually got taken by a new distillery that just started making spirit last week, or a couple of weeks ago. This is called 8 Doors Distillery. We haven't checked that one yet, but apparently that took the spot. Until then, this was the northest distillery in Scotland before you start going to Orkney and the islands. We traveled all the way from Dustown to here. It took us about 3 hours and a half, almost 4 hours to get here. It's a lovely drive. So if you have a car and you're around Scotland and you're keen to do the drive, it's definitely worth coming in. Not only because the drive itself, but because the distillery is awesome. It's after 8 distilleries that we've done so far in the tour, this one is the most hands-on that we've been to. Everything is done manually here. They have about 9 staff working 5 days a week, in which basically they do everything by hand, from the loading the grains to putting the yeast, distillation, recording the distillation. Everything is done with pen and paper. It's actually super cute to see. And the distillery itself is actually quite tiny compared to other distilleries that we've been reviewing. But anyway, without waiting any more longer, let's go through the tour in itself. We got taken by Paul. This was as well his last day of tours. He's not going to be here anymore, but he was a word of knowledge, and basically he just did 6 months at the distillery just to learn more about whiskey, because that was his passion. Now, a little bit of history on the distillery. As I said in previous videos, we're not going to go through a lot of the history in itself. We're going to focus more on the distillery itself, but just a little bit of tidbits of information that are important. This was created in 1826 by James Henderson. In around the 1920s, they closed down the distillery because in Wick, the town that Pulteney is on, went through a provision era for 25 years. So they closed for 25 years and reopened in the late 50s. So like a lot of towns in Scotland, actually prohibition, like in America, was a thing. So unfortunately they had to shut down. But that didn't stop them. In the 1960s, they did a massive renovation and they added the stills and the current structures that you currently have. The tour itself took about 2 hours, and they take you through every single aspect. And a couple of the aspects that they took us through in this distillery tour that we haven't seen in other distillery tours, so it's actually really cool to see. Now, just to go into the specifics, I took notes. Basically, they do about 71 tons of barley per week. The barley itself comes from bird malts. They used to do their own barley back in the day, but they don't do anymore because it's a lot of barley that they do, and all the barley gets sourced locally as well. The grade is pretty much standard, 70-10-20, so 70% grist, 10% husk, and 20% flour. Sorry, the other way around, 10% flour, 20% husk. Basically, that's pretty standard. Then you got the mash tun, which is in a tiny room, like you can barely walk through it. And apparently, to replace it, they had to replace it in the 60s. They actually take the roof apart, and then they bring it down. It's a very heavy work process. It's made out of stainless steel, and has a dome of copper. Like we said, it's very similar to Glenronach and also Glengasar in that respect. And it's also what Paul was saying, and this is something that we get reiterated by other distilleries, is that copper, anything that uses copper in the process of the fermentation and anything that is involved in the process of the distillation, copper absorbs a lot of the sulfurs and reacts with the alcohol and actually makes it a lot more, not smoother, but basically just takes the rough edges around. Now, after that, they took us to the fermentation tanks. They have 6 of them. I forgot to talk about the waters, sorry. So in the mash tun, they have 4 waters. That is similar to Glenronach and Glengasar as well. The first water is at 68.5 degrees. And then they do a massive jump. This is a first one. Usually they do 72 degrees after, but in this particular case, they did 85 degrees Celsius. And then they do two more waters that go through the mash at 87 degrees just to take all the rest. The leftover of the mash gets sold to the farmers around the area for cattle feed and whatnot. Basically, after that, the fermentation tanks are all the washbacks. They have 6 of them. They're stainless steel, really nice. They look brand new, very, very tidy place, and they're 30,000 liters each. They do the fermentation as well is actually quite interesting because everything is done so manually here. They actually, because of the way staff rotation works, they can only do fermentation for between Monday and Wednesdays for 60 hours. So those 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then they put it for 100 hours. So they left fermenting on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because most of the people that work here, they have Saturdays and Sundays off. So then they come back on Monday and then they replenish everything and all that stuff. So basically it's a 60-hour and then 100 hours in which they mix everything together. The wort comes out at 8.5%, which is pretty standard, and then actually puts down to the stills. The stills are really interesting. This is the first ones I've seen because unfortunately we couldn't go to the other. There's 3 distilleries in total in Scotland that have this sort of still. The washback still, or the low ones, not the washback, sorry. The wash still basically has the top of the still is flat. You'll see it on the video. So basically you can't, it's just, instead of going in a curve, it just basically comes flat. It creates a lot of reflux and it creates a very unique spirit. Once the low ones come out at 23%, they could put in the stills. So there's only 2 stills. One of them is the wash still is 21,000 liters, and the spirit still is 17,000 liters. The other interesting fact about why they're using a flat top on the still is because it was actually they measure it wrong, so it couldn't fit in the building. So they couldn't, and the building. The part of the steel that had to go inside the building was touching like a low-bearing. Basically, it was holding the building together, so they couldn't take that part out. So they had to redesign the steel, and they did basically because of a bad measurement. They had to do a flat steel. And then the spirit still, as I said, is 17,000 liters. The pot ale that finishes after the wash still. Basically gets sold to the farmers. The other interesting fact about this one as well that I forgot to mention is that most distilleries, they clean the wash still completely. They with basically steam and water, they clean it completely after distillations. These guys, on the other hand, they leave a little bit of residue of the pot still in the wash still, and they keep reusing it. The heart is at 12.5%. So that's very, very little. And then the other interesting part was that when they took us to the safe, to the spirit safe, actually they just have it open and there you can you can smell it. It's awesome. But usually a spirit safe is where basically they're key and lock. You can't really open it or taste it because of the taxman and this basically insurance. So it was quite nice, quite interesting to see. The other thing, after that, the cask program is pretty straightforward. They put all the liquid. They take us here behind me is actually the bonded warehouse, which is basically where the spirit receiver house is. So they took us in there. They show us where the spirit safe. Well, all the spirit is held, and then how the barrel, how they put it on the barrels, how fast does it goes. It's actually really, really interesting, and it's the first distillery that showed us how this is done. After that, they just run us through all the casks and what they're planning to do in the future. At the moment, they think they're doing 98% of all the spirits is going into American oak, predominantly from Jim Beam, and then the rest is Oloroso sherry. The other 2%, only 2% goes into Oloroso sherry. They have five warehouses on site, and one of them is in Glasgow. One of them is one warehouse is a Dunnigan, a style warehouse. The other one is a massive, huge warehouse that we went in. They have 8-9 rows of barrels all the way to the top. It's very, very impressive when you go in there. And then the Dungeon warehouse as well is absolutely stunning, really old school as well, and 3 rows of barrels. But the good thing about this tour as well is that they let you film anything, they let you take pictures of anything. They're really open about the type of product that they do. They don't care about it, and they're very, very extremely friendly. They're obviously allowed to film in this beautiful spot. After that, we went and we tried 5 whiskies. We tried the 3 of them that the core range, and then 2 of them that are distillery only. We tried the 12-year-old, the 18-year-old, the Huddart, and then we tried a bourbon cask that it was a single cask bottle at 61.4%, and then we did a sherry cask that it was 61.9%. Both of them delicious, but really, really strong. It took us a while. Sorry, the bourbon cask was 15-year-old and the sherry cask was 14-year-old. The 12 and the 14 are quite available all around the world. And then in 2018, they added this one to the core range. It's called the Huddart. It's a very interesting story because apparently they got the wrong. They ordered sherry casks to finish one of the 12-year-old whiskies, and instead they got pitted whiskey barrels. So they decided to go with it and create this whiskey instead. They named it Huddart because this gentleman was one of the captains that came to Old Pulteney and actually helped map the city and help with the fisheries and all that stuff. So and the street which Old Pulteney is actually called Huddart Street. So that's basically that's why they named the whiskey. Now, the whiskey itself is on the nose. You don't really get a lot of peat. The barrels that they use are American oak and then ex-American oak as well, but filled with peated whiskey. So you still on the nose. You don't get as much peat as you would get from, like let's just say an Islay whiskey, like a Lafroig or Ardbeg or like a Vulling kind of thing. But once you do taste it, it's actually a lot of smoke actually does come through, but the spirit does it because the spirit wasn't peated, and they don't do peated whiskey here. You can barely smell it on the nose. Like it's not like it's not like an Ardbeg where you just smell it and you go like that's pure smoke. So on the palate at 46% ABV, that's really, really good. As I said, it's a great ABV just to showcase the neutral spirit and to actually be able to appreciate the whiskey itself, and without burning the back of your throat if you drink like over 50-55% ABV. You get a lot of toffee, a lot of vanilla. There's like a little bit of grassy, like fresh notes of like apples and pears. It's actually quite fresh spirit, and then you get in the back, once you swallow it, you get like that smoke, that pittiness coming through. So all in all, it's a great addition to the core range. This is going to be available all around the world. Apparently they're shipping it to 100 different countries. And even though it was a mistake, they're planning to keep it in the core range. So they got really good feedback from it. So basically you're going to keep doing it, which is great because it's a great addition. So I forgot to mention as well that they have a 15-year-old in the core range, but they ran out of. They're still working on it, and they're going to release some more, but it's currently out of stock. Anyway, guys, this is us from Old Pulteney. It has been a great day of driving and drinking whiskey and visiting the distillery. Everything here is heritage listed, and the town itself is super cute. We have amazing sandwiches. You can have a great view of all the ocean, all the fishermen working. It's a great trip. Definitely worth it if you're driving around Scotland. So anyway, hopefully you enjoy it. Please let us know if you have any requests or anything that you want to see in particular, and we'll see you next time. Slán Jabba.